Shabbat Shalom, everyone. How are you? In today's Torah portion, we see a special blessing. Do you open Shabbat? What does your family do when you open Shabbat? Do you light the candles? And do you say the blessing? Yes, usually mom lights the candles and then dad says the blessings. And if you're a boy or if you have sons at the table, what is the blessing he says over the sons? May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Yes, that comes from today's Torah portion. So Jacob, who is also called Israel, is getting older and he wants to bless Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And so he tells Joseph to bring the boys to him. And Joseph brings them, and he brings the older Manasseh on his right side, and Ephraim, the younger, on his left side. And that's the way he brings them to Jacob, who is also called Israel, to bless them. But Jacob crosses his hands, and he puts his right hand on Ephraim's head and his left hand on Manasseh's head. And he crosses his arms to do the blessing. Well, Joseph is a little upset. He says, no, Dad, you mixed them up. Manasseh is the older. And do you know what Jacob says? I know, he says, but I am putting Ephraim first. And then we see the blessing. In your name, Israel will pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Now, last year we talked about God's preference over and over and over again for putting the younger before the older. So you can go back to last year's video and look at that. But we also see in today's Torah portion that this is the way that Jacob blesses his son Joseph with the double portion. So later in our Parsha, in Genesis chapter 49, beginning in verse 22, we see that Joseph gets the double portion of the blessings. And we see that Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over the wall. And you can read the rest of that and see all the blessings that Jacob pronounces over Joseph. And through his children, Ephraim and Manasseh, he gets the double blessing. That's pretty cool. So we see that God chooses the younger over the older. We see that Jacob chooses Joseph to receive the double portion, and we see that in today's blessing. But what else do we see when Jacob crosses his arms? Do you know what letter that makes in Hebrew? What letter does that look like? Well, that's interesting, because if you've learned the block letters of modern Hebrew, it doesn't look like anything. But if you know how Hebrew was written in the ancient days, this looks like the letter Tav. Isn't that cool? What does it mean that it looks like the letter Tav? Well, did you know that the Tav can mean a mark? A mark. It's a sign of covenant or a sign of a seal. And we see this in Ezekiel chapter 9, verses 4 through 6, it says, "Go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it." So this mark is put on the foreheads of those who are grieving at the ungodly things that are being done. As I listened, he said to the others, "Follow him through the city and kill, without showing pity or compassion. Slaughter old men, young men and maidens, women and children, but do not touch anyone who has the mark." Those who are marked with the sign of the covenant of God on their foreheads will be saved. Isn't that cool? So do you think Jacob was showing us a picture of being sealed with God, marked with his name, when he blessed Ephraim and Manasseh with the sign of the Tav? We see this again in Revelation. Revelation chapter 7, verse 3, it says, "Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God." Wow. So the Tav is a mark of the covenant, a seal of the name of God. And when Jacob puts his hands on the heads of his grandsons and blesses him with that, and when your fathers put that blessing over you, whether it's the blessings of Ephraim and Manasseh or of Sarah, Rivkah, Rachel, and Leah, that blessing is a blessing from Adonai through your father to you. Shabbat Shalom.